when HaKadosh Baruch Hu sends Moshe to Mitzrayim, he says, "V'ani akshet le Paro," I will harden Paro's heart, and he won't listen to you. And the Mefarshim and Jewish philosophers all ask the question that this seems to go against the idea that there has to be free will, that's to be bechira chofshit. The Rambam was famous in both asking the question and responding to it in Hilchos Tshuva, and he says, there's a basic fundamental principle which we accept, which the entire Torah and all the Nevi'im is based on, and that's the idea of free will. A person can choose to do bad, can do good. And then he says there are some verses in the Torah that seem to contradict this principle. And one of the verses he's referring to is Ani akshet le Paro, I will harden Paro's heart, and he will not have the possibility of choosing to send them or not to send them, because he will be forced to choose in one way. And the Ramban gives the answer that he gives, and according to the Rambam, since Paro originally had free choice, and he could have freed the people, he didn't have to enslave them, he didn't have to murder all the male children, but once he had done such terrible things, the punishment that he received was to take away his free choice. But the chait that he did was done based on free choice. And later on, the fact that he wasn't allowed to choose to free them was part of the punishment, not part of what he's punished for. I want to take a different approach, and I want to try to show that it might actually be embedded in the words of the Torah itself. It's an approach that other people have already said before me. We'll see the Sefer Ikarim, the Svarno, the Akeres Yitzchak. There are Mefarshim that took this approach, but before we get to that approach, I want to raise an interesting question. When the Torah talks about, throughout the Makos, about hardening Paro's heart, it doesn't use the term akshe, lakshot et libo, to harden his heart, although some English translations throughout use that term. But rather it talks about lechazek et le Paro, to strengthen his heart, or lachbid le Paro, to make his heart heavy. Now, it's clear that when you're translating, you can't have a literal translation because, the terms mean something else. If you would say, a heavy heart is somebody who's sad. So although in Hebrew it might be a term that's, that you can use, but you can't, use a literal translation, I will make Paro's heart heavy. So you have to use different ways of translating it. So therefore, as I said, some of the English translations are, I will harden Paro's heart. But they make no distinction between vayichazek et le Paro, vayachbed et le Paro, Paro hichbid et libo. And there are a number of different times when the Torah regarding the same makkah, uses both terms. In other words, it doesn't seem to be synonymous, but rather seems to refer to different things. For instance, after the Tanin, which wasn't one of the makot, but preceded the makot, which was to show God's power. So it says, "Vayichazek le Paro v'lo shama alehem." He strengthened Paro strengthened his heart. Vayomer Hashem Moshe kavei le Paro. So and then Hashem said that Paro's heart is kaved, is heavy. Why does it switch the terms? Is it coming to tell us that really means the same? Or take, for example, by Makat Barad, "Vayar Paro ki chadal matar v'barad." V'kolot v'yosef lachto v'yichabed libo hu v'avadav. He made his heart heavy. Again, that's literally, but that's not what it means. V'yichazek le Paro v'lo shlach b'Yisrael. And then right afterwards it says v'yichazek le Paro. Paro's heart became strengthened. What I would like to do is try to understand what is the difference between lachbid et libo and v'yichazek et libo. In order to do that, I want to start with the first makkah, because the first makkah, which begins the entire process, I think is very, very illustrative in terms of pointing out what some of the different roles of the makkot were. So if we take a look at the first makkah, Lech el Paro baboker, go to him in the morning, and then it says, V'amateh asher napach lenachash, tikach b'yadecha, take the mateh asher napach lenachash. Which was the mateh asher napach lenachash? Was it Aaron's or was it Moshe's? Moshe at the sneh had the mateh, the rod, turned into a nachash. Aaron's mateh turned into a tanin. The term nachash is not used. So mateh shetikach b'yadecha is referring to not Aaron's rod, but rather Moshe's. V'amata ilav Hashem lokei avrim shlachani elecha lemor, shlach et ami v'yavduni. And if you don't listen, Hine anochi, Moshe Rabbeinu says, Hine anochi makeb mateh asher biyadi, alamayim asher bayor v'nefchu adam. So who is hitting the Yair? With which staff? The psukim up until now seem very, very clear that we're talking about Moshe. And then Hadagai Shabiyar Tamut, all the fish in the Yair will die. And the Egyptians will not be able to drink from the Yair. And then it says, Vayomer Hashem Moshe, Emor Aaron, Kach Matcha, take your staff, Aaron, Unetei Yadcha Meimei Mitzrayim, Al Narotam Bal Yorehem, Val Agmeihem, Val Kol Mikvei Meimehem, V'Yuladam, V'Yadam B'Chol Eretz Mitzrayim, V'Eitzim Avanim. He tells Aaron, take your staff and to wave it on all the waters of all of Egypt. And all the waters of all of Egypt will turn to dam. So the simple reading, because there's a medrash that really, that tries to say that it was Aaron and Moshe couldn't because of Hakar Satov, but the simple, Pshuto Shel Mikra, the simple reading of the Torah here indicates that you're dealing with, some kind of a hybrid. On the one hand, Moshe is acting in the presence of Paro and hitting the Yair which is in front of them, while Aaron is taking his staff and waving it and turning all the other waters of Mitzrayim into dam. And then it says, Vayasu kein Moshe v'Aaron. Both of them, both Aaron and Moshe, did what they were supposed to do. Vayarem b'mateh vayachet hamayim goes on Moshe. Asher b'yaor le'inei Paro, in the presence of Paro, unei avadav. Vayafchu kol hamayim asher b'yaor ledam, and all the mayim in the Nile turned into blood, and the fish died, and they couldn't drink from the Yair. Vayiyadam b'chol eretz Mitzrayim, and then there was also dam in the rest of Egypt, which is what Aaron did. Okay, an interesting way of reading the psukim. It's very, very meduyak in terms of pshuto shel mikra. As a matter of fact, later on when we talk about the when the people claimed that there was no water and Moshe had to take his staff and hit the rock. So what does it say? You should take your staff that you used to hit the Yair. When did Moshe hit the Yair? I thought it was Aaron. By the Tzfardim, by the dam. And it's clear that HaKadosh Baruch Hu tells Moshe, take your staff that you used to hit the Yair. So this strengthens what I'm claiming, that really you're talking about two different actions. On the one hand, Moshe, in the presence of Paro and the Chartumim and his Avadim, smites the Yair itself, while Aaron waves the Yair on the rest of Mitzrayim. What's the point of splitting it up between these two different people? Why have it split up in this way? So I think that when you talk to the Makos, you're talking about two different problems. One problem is the Makos try to come and to prove, HaKadosh Baruch Hu exists. HaKadosh Baruch Hu is all powerful. Bezot teida ki ani Hashem. Bezot teida ki ein kamoni b'kerev ha'aretz. Bezot teida ki ani Hashem b'kerev ha'aretz. This way you will learn that God is infinite, almighty, created everything, created the whole world, is powerful. It's a religious argument. When Paro said, I don't know who this Hashem is, and I don't have to listen to him, you're talking about a religious problem. On the other hand, the Makos also come to put pressure, economic pressure, on the Mitzrayim. The entire economy begins to fall apart. People died, the flocks died, all the produce is destroyed. They don't have nothing to drink, they have nothing to eat. It puts physical pressure on Mitzrayim. When you're talking about, the psukim say, Hayareas Dvar Hashem, by Barad, brought his flock into their houses so they shouldn't die. Hayareas Dvar Hashem. So in other words, there were people that, because the Makos, began to fear God. On the other hand, when Avdei Paro come and says, we stumble like Hatem Tidaki Avdam Mitzrayim, they're not talking about recognizing that God exists, but how long do we have to suffer all this pressure that we're going through? Let's just give in and let's cut our losses. They're talking about the pressure of the Makos rather than the religious significance of the Makos. When you're talking about Moshe, Moshe represents God. So Moshe, in the presence of power in the Khartoumim, what happens there at that moment is that the Yair in their presence turns into Dam. That's coming and indicating Zotedaki Ani Hashem. What Aaron does is that there should be pressure because there's nothing to drink in all of Egypt. So he makes all the rest of the waters in all of Egypt turn into Dam as well. So Aaron's role and Moshe's role are two different roles because you're dealing with two different purposes for the Makos. What I would like to claim is that the term Vayichabedes libo usually refers to being stubborn. Something that's heavy is not movable. On the one hand, in order not to give in to the pressure, the physical pressure, the economic pressure of the Makos, you're Mechabedes libo. That's either Hashem is Mechabedes libo or Pharoah himself is Mechabedes libo. And you're talking about being stubborn and not giving in to pressure, the pressure of the Makos. But when you talk about Veichazeket libo, you talk about strengthening his heart and giving Pharoah the courage, or Pharoah having the courage to stand up to HaKadosh Baruch Hu, to the infinite, to the holy other. To be able to stand up to God, even though you're only a human being. That requires strength, not stubbornness, but rather strength. So we talk about Veichazeket libo. You're talking about giving him the strength. For instance, when in Yoshua, when they send the Meraglim, so what do they say in the name of? It says, Ki shamanu et asher hovit Hashem et mei Yam Suf. What did they say in Yericho? We heard that Hashem made the Mei Yam Suf dry. We heard what you did to Sichon v'Og. It made our hearts melt. We didn't have the courage. Religiously, they melted. They didn't have the strength. There was no Veichazeket libo. So melting of the heart, when you're in the presence of God and His infiniteness, you melt. To have the strength to stand up, you have to be Mechazeket leParo. When we say Kaver El Hashem Chazak Yametz Libecha, are we asking God to take away our Bechira Chavshis? Or are we asking God to give us strength so we're able to courage and to stand up to our Yetzirah, to our other passions, so that we're able to stand up? Chazak Yametz Libecha. We're not asking God to take away our Bechira, but to strengthen our hearts. Veichazeket libo is to give our hearts strength, to strengthen them. While Veichabedes libo is to make the heart heavy, immovable, stubborn, so you don't give in to the pressures. Now, what I mentioned before is that there is a third approach, and there's another approach to how to deal with the problem of Bechira Chavshis. What the Sefer Ikarim says is that the idea of strengthening Paro's heart was to give him Bechira Chavshis. Because if because of pressures or because of fear, you do things that you don't want to do, your Bechira Chavshis was taken away. Strengthening God's heart wasn't to take away his Bechira Chavshis, but to give him Bechira Chavshis. Making him stubborn or making his heart stubborn wasn't to take away his Bechira Chavshis, but allow him that he should be able to, as a sovereign individual, to make decisions, not being pressured, not by the economic hardships, and not also by the presence of the Almighty. The idea was to give him the ability to have Bechira Chavshis and to stand up to all those things that either would make a normal person's heart melt or make a person just cave into all the pressures. So this reading basically turns the entire question around, that the idea of Veichazeket libo and Veichabedes libo was not to take away his Bechira Chavshis, but allow him to choose for himself. And what Pharoah chose to do was not to free the people.